I'll start again. Welcome everybody to the Critical Food Studies Conference. My name is Desiree. I'm based at the University of the Western Cape, and I'm one of the co-organizers together with Vasu, Reddy, Moletsane, and Nhlanhla. Speak more about myself later, but my main role now is to introduce our institutional leaders who head the university, who are leading figures at the universities that are driving this collaborative event. Our first speaker is Prof. Frantz, who is the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research and Innovation at the University of the Western Cape. She'll be followed by Professor Duncan, who is the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic at the University of Pretoria, which is in Gauteng, South Africa. And to round us off, we'll have Professor Nhlanhla Mkhize, who is Deputy Vice Chancellor and Head of College in the Humanities at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, which is, of course, in the South African province of KwaZulu-Natal. So I'll hand over now to Professor Frantz.
Thank you so much, Prof. Lewis, and good morning, everybody. Indeed, an exciting moment. I feel so like a child in the toy shop with this online new era that we are facing ourselves. But let me do what I came here to do this morning. Greetings to all of you in your different time zones to the Critical Food Studies International Conference. This conference is co-hosted by the University of the Western Cape as the lead partner, and University of KwaZulu-Natal and the University of Pretoria. That in itself is an amazing space to be in, that we can work together as universities to be able to host such a conference. As you may know, UWC is well known for its teaching and scholarship on food justice and food security. One of our long-established sites is PLAS, that is the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies. They have done excellent work in this space. A more recent one is our Center of Excellence in Food Security, which is co-hosted between UWC and the University of Pretoria. The director, Prof. Julian May, is one of the participants at this conference, and they've done excellent work in this area. The Mellon-funded Critical Food Studies program, also spread across different universities in South Africa, is both recent and novel in driving humanities-related work on food. Yes, we are in an exciting space to be able to understand how we can work together to solve critical problems that we are faced with. I'm sure the organizers and hosts will fill you in on the program's history and vision. It's my role mainly to welcome you to this event on behalf of the university. I'm especially pleased to welcome our keynote speakers, drawn from both South Africa and the United States. Our North American keynotes and participants are thanked especially for being active at this time of the morning. Prof. Kule Odutola, originally from Nigeria but currently based in the US, will address us by drawing on his rich background of scholarship on language and the media, as well as work as a photojournalist and poet. A second keynote speaker I want to welcome this morning is Prof. Jonathan Highfield, a professor of literature in North America who has written several books dealing with the meanings of food in constructions of home in Africa. Our third and fourth keynote speakers are Prof. Williams Forson from the US and Dr. Yvette Abrams from South Africa. Both are Black feminist scholars who have long been immersed in critical work on food and eco-criticism that takes race and women's gendered experience squarely into account. As the conference website indicates, Prof. Williams Forson has just published a book that promises to break important ground in Black feminist food studies, while Dr. Abrams continues to inspire with the presentations on climate change around the world, publications on plant life and the environment for different audiences, and a courageous work as an organic farmer and eco-feminist. Our keynote speakers also include pioneering figures in creative arts, practice, and theory. I am pleased to welcome Ms. Shelley Barry, who teaches film at the University of Johannesburg, and Ms. Jackie Job, a senior lecturer in UCT's Performing Arts Department, who will provide keynote sessions that fuse talk with creative expression. I have no doubt that we will learn invaluably from them how important it is for creative expression to open up knowledge making that can be blunted by words and written language only. I've been told by one of our people here that we have the Daily Maverick covering this event. I want to welcome them. It is truly encouraging to see connections being made between work in the academy and the media. At a time when we urgently need critical and informed discussions about food, it is relationships that is important. And this relationship should not only be in ivory towers, but should be there debated in the general public. Colleagues, I love interdisciplinary work, and I love seeing it happening and becoming alive. I see on the program that we have participants and presenters from several African countries, from India, from the US, from the UK, and all over the world. Welcome, and may you all enjoy this conference. I would like to say that in this time where we find ourselves in this lockdown period, I know that conferences are important and conversations with one another is important. And I want to say thank you to the organizers of this conference for setting up this conference in such a way that conversations can continue to take place. So let me stop by saying welcome and enjoy the engagement. I thank you.
Conference participants, keynote speakers, colleagues, my name is Duncan, and it is my privilege to welcome you to this conference, which, as indicated in the conference brochure, is part of the A.W. Mellon-funded collaborative project between the University of the Western Cape, the University of Pretoria, and the University of KwaZulu-Natal. The project, of course, is titled Critical Food Studies, Transdisciplinary Humanities Approaches. Now, a significant objective of this project, I'm told, is that it endeavors to offer an alternative take on often uncritical and stultifying debates about food. Viewing food and food studies as a site of transdisciplinary humanities scholarship, this project casts the net wider. Importantly, the project, I'm informed, seeks to address the much written about erosion of the status of the humanities within and beyond South Africa. The project, it is clear, has already established itself as a vibrant research community that directly addresses the broader academic project through, firstly, recruiting, supervising, and mentoring postgraduate students, as well as postdoctoral and emerging researchers, so as to facilitate their active participation in research communities and public debate. Secondly, producing knowledge through established scholarly or non-traditional academic platforms, including new digital platforms. Third, building networks for generating transdisciplinary and transnational knowledge. Fourth, fostering conversations among scholars within the Southern African region and beyond. Fifth, facilitating public intellectual activities that stimulate debate about and critical understanding of food as a public issue. To my mind, your conference titled Critical Food Studies, South Africa and Beyond, represents a timely intervention that brings together not only local partners, but voices from across the globe, and particularly from the South. Once again, participants, keynote speakers, on behalf of the University of Pretoria, I wish to warmly welcome each of you to this conference. The University of Pretoria considers itself privileged to be associated with the conference, as well as the Critical Food Studies Transdisciplinary Humanities Project. I have perused your program, and it is clear that it offers, as one of the conference participants put it, and I quote, a veritable feast of conversations and creative engagements. I wish you all an engagement over the next 3 days that will be vibrant, energizing, and generative. Colleagues, participants, I thank you for your attention. Do enjoy the conference.
Program Director, esteemed keynote presenters, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the University of KwaZulu-Natal and our partnering institutions, it is my honor to welcome you to this virtual humanities conference on critical food studies in South Africa and beyond. We are further indebted to the Andrew Mellon Foundation for supporting core humanities and interdisciplinary projects of this nature. Food studies is at the core of who we are as a human being. Not only is food security at the base of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the subject also talks to various intersecting issues such as the following: gender, the arts and aesthetics, the division of labor, politics and the economy, land and landlessness, history, memory and identity, and most importantly, the body, insofar as it is in the first instance the body and then the soul that suffers the most where there is food insecurity. Ultimately, food security is at the core of our humanity, and insecurity takes away the means to live our lives as dignified human selves. Ultimately, these are matters of justice in the historical sense, as well as the contemporary and future dimensions. The 3-day program talks to these and many other issues. I must express our sincerest appreciation to Professor Moletsane, who is leading our Center for Rural Studies, which acts as a key driver for food security studies at the University of KwaZulu-Natal and also linking it to various communities. I do hope that the deliberations over the next 3 days will not end within the confines of academia, but will go beyond and impact community at large. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you and I wish you a very, very fruitful deliberations over the next 3 days. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Frantz, Professor Duncan, and Professor Mkhize for those encouraging words to get our conference going. I've already introduced myself, but allow me to let my colleagues, co-organizers, introduce themselves briefly. Lebo, would you like to?
Yes, I'm Relebohile Moletsane, otherwise known as Lebo. I'm based at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. I'm happy to be here with my co-PIs and co-hosts for this wonderful conference, and happy to welcome you.
Thank you, and good morning from me. It's Vasu Reddy. I'm one of the co-conspirators of this project with Desiree and Relebohile. I'm based at the University of Pretoria, and we're really excited, well, at a personal level, all of us, but me especially, to meet with you, even in this virtual platform, and looking forward to the conversations.
So people, we thought of doing a fairly structured talk by way of introducing the conference, but decided that we do something a bit more interactive and just chat through some issues that will probably be raised again and again. So one of the first questions we want to raise is, what is critical food studies and what does it mean to foreground the humanities in food studies? And we've often spoken about this, but we realize that generally food studies in the global south, in South Africa generally, is often seen in very instrumentalist ways. The aim is very often to grow more food efficiently, to ensure that a wider range of people get access to food. So there are very, very complex cultural, symbolic, and social meanings that tend to be neglected. And it's these that we want to explore in transdisciplinary ways, which doesn't mean sticking kind of to the idea of the humanities only. I, for example, find that I've become more and more interested in biology and political economy alongside the humanities. So for me, that's that's very much how I would begin to define critical food studies. And I'm sure this will come up again and again. But let me ask Vasu and Lebo if they'd like to add anything there at this point.
Well, maybe I could start. Thanks, Desiree, for just initiating this. I mean, for me, I think what's critical beyond seeing food as a sort of a means of survival and a macronutrient that's so essential to our life and living, that food is very personal and to a large extent also political. It's about knowledge and it's about our existence, the ontology. And in so many ways, these are issues also very much connected to my own thinking and work in gender. The personal is political. Food as a paradigm and as a lens on the world enables us to be reflective, not just simply about what we're eating, but also about the meanings of food. And I use that in a plural way, our association, our relationships, and to recognize that thinking critically about food as an object of knowledge and about our existence is to locate it in various systems of activities and power. So those are some critical issues that come to my mind, and there's a social life and a political life of food at a critical level. I think these are critical questions that come up.
Yeah.
I just want to take off from where Vasu left to add that for many of us, if not for all of us, food is also a very embodied way in which we express who we are. So food is cultural, and I use that very broadly. For example, we use it when a baby is born. We express our happiness through food. We use it when somebody dies. That's our expression of grief and coming together. And so food as cultural, and food as community, and food as identity, so to speak.
Thanks, Vasu, and thanks, Lebo. Another issue that we want to raise is the title of the conference, which is Critical Food Studies, South Africa and Beyond. We very much wanted to ground this conference in the global South, in South Africa specifically, but to establish a kind of a Southern perspective, but also with an understanding that we live in a globalized world, especially a globalized food world. But we did want to try and develop a way of trying to see the world, explore the world from a particular perspective. So to look outwards into the world from the perspective of the South. So I don't know, Vasu, Lebo, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, perhaps I could say with some background music behind me, it might be not pleasant, forgive me. But yeah, I think that's very, very critical. I mean, to recognize that, food is a set of associations and systems, and for us to think through the lens of food, where we're located in terms of region, nation, identity, sometimes can be limiting and insular. And there's a particular utility, I think, in moving beyond the domains of what might be immediate to us. And I think what has been stated in our thinking about this conference is considering a Southern view. And I don't necessarily imply that Southern is a homogeneous, a unified, uniform entity, but to look at dominant forces or forms of power and the way meaning is made and negotiated, and how we, wherever we're located, and in this particular context in the South, is to engage the center and the periphery, as you've also indicated, and what accrues, what value is made possible and possibilities in thinking anew, afresh from such vantage points. And of course, offering counter perspectives, views that would in some ways correct perceptions that are created and constructed elsewhere.
I think one of the things that, just to link up to what you've said, Vasu, that we were very excited about was to receive so many abstracts from the rest of the continent and from India, because so often our conferences, and this has a lot to do with funding, and knowledge flows and knowledge consolidation that are rooted very much in resources. But we don't often have opportunities to have South-South dialogues. And I'm very much looking forward to the kinds of exchanges we can have with the North, but also among people from the global South quite generally. Lebo, do you want to say anything there?
Yes, and this provides us with an opportunity with our histories of colonization and in South Africa of apartheid and the resistance movements on our continent and elsewhere, to use food as an entry point to sort of thinking about contemporary struggles with lessons from the struggles of the past. So I think food looked at from this perspective provides us with very rich opportunities and spaces for those struggles.
Indeed. If I could just chime in there, I mean, there's a very interesting question in the general chat that's come through from Busisiwe, and I think it's pertinent to a conference and conversations such as this, and I assume that it will crop up in debates and discussion. How do we talk about the critical in a poverty-stricken but is a lack of food context, which really goes to the heart of a project like this, and that is thinking critically about food opens up questions about not just simply the lack of food, but the meanings of food and how we speak about it critically in a social context within which food is located, where hunger is also a factor as the absence of food, where the food is missing. And I think that absence-presence dynamic enables us to think about these issues in broader ways. And I would hope that the papers, and there are several, I think, that touch on this either directly or circuitously, and I think it would be useful to keep note of that critical issue in this broader set of conversations.
Yeah, I also want to thank Busisiwe for posting that question, and people, please do feel free. We have a bit of time, I think about 10 minutes. So we can take some comments, although a lot of these issues will be taken up later. I think very often also there's an assumption that the humanities is somehow jettisoning the hard political economy questions. Whereas in fact, in the humanities, there's very, very rigorous question raising and exploration of power. For example, just thinking about the languages that are used to talk about food and how constraining they can be and how they can serve the interests of dominant groups, which makes me think of how we've organized the themes, and it's spoken about in detail in the booklet in terms of what papers have come in. My personal preference is a panel theme called discursive space clearing, because I think there are so many dominant, entrenched, naturalized ways of talking about food. Yeah. Vasu, do you want to talk about the panel topics or how we've structured them?
Yes, I mean, thank you. Just to build on what you're saying, I mean, I think there's a sort of a feast of thematics or themes, aligned to the various papers here that crop up. But for me personally, I mean, not that I'm exceptionalizing it, but I think the issue of food and identity and culture and heritage are critical issues that crop up in this context in a variety of ways. I mean, the critical literature tells us, it's common sense. Every mouthful, every meal tells us something about ourselves and about our place in the world. whether it's the past, the present, the future. And I think also incredibly important how food is often not viewed as a heritage resource. Food is a resource that we take for granted, but it's also a heritage. There's an identification with it. And the question one might ask at a critical level, whose heritage do particular foods belong to? And that's also a critical question, and how that is evolving. So I think those are sort of important themes for us. And while I am at Desiree, to also obviously we welcomed everybody, but to recognize one of our keynotes in the early hours of the morning, Jonathan Highfeld from the US. Good morning to you, joining us very early. So we're delighted about that.
Oh, Jonathan in the chat. Yes. I don't know what time it is. You must be very, very, I don't know. Probably
not sleeping.
Well, I see there's another comment from Donna. Good morning. Critical is to reflect on what happens when food is framed as a utility, what blind spots emerge, what and who gets invisibilized. Absolutely. I think so often it's for me a really interesting question, which I think will be picked up, especially in the panels on humanizing food justice movements. The trend is to think about, these bodies that must be made productive and functional to serve the broader body politic, rather than the well-being of people in relation to food. A functionalist approach to food. And I think here is where the humanities plays a very important role. Vasu, did you want to add something? Or John, did you want to say something more? By the way, people, you are welcome to step onto the stage if you do want to say something more. Jackie can easily facilitate that if you feel constrained by just putting things in the chat.
I just want to add two things that are my favorite things in the program is food as embodied and performative. Even though I don't have a creative bone in my body, I'm really fascinated by that theme that goes through the 3 days, so to speak. So I'm looking forward to those papers and those performances that we will see throughout the day. And the second one is food as community making. The way in which, and again, at the risk of using food as in an instrumentalist way, but the ways in which food brings people together. I don't think as humanities scholars we can underestimate the importance of coming together, particularly in the context of what is going on in the world in terms of race and in our country, gender and gender-based violence. What might we, how might we use food to have those debates and those struggles around those issues is very fascinating for me in this program.
I'd like to pick up on what you said about the role of creativity and performance, because so often, even within the humanities, where we are supposed to squarely recognize the autonomy of the visual arts, the performing arts, there's a tendency to, I'm using the word again, instrumentalize performance or music. So you have people talking, and then you have a poet on the side who kind of illustrates, and no one really takes that seriously as knowledge. It's entertainment. What we have tried to do is foreground performative work, creative work as knowledge in its own right, which forces us to feel, see, and I think people will really find this in the case of all the performative work, the visual artwork that's on the program. I do hope that that will be enjoyed and we can have rich conversations about that we often don't have.
Yeah.
Any other comments in the chat? I want to, although we will probably raise this towards, I like what Prof. Lebo has mentioned. Yeah. No, I think it is a huge issue which will be raised again and again. Donna, it looks as if you have a lot to say. Do you not want to go live? Specifically thinking about land, fish, seed, is nature not food, food not us? Yeah, I think what you did, sorry. We're all starting to talk at once. I think what Donna is raising is the way in which the work on food and the critical thinking around food is starting to lead us into so many broad directions that oblige us to rethink our sense of what is human.
Yes.
And a lot of the work on food is actually related to work on the Anthropocene. You know, what it's just very hard to not think about what it means to be human in relation to what's being defined as the non-human. Dolly, is there anything else you want to add? Because that's very much of a comment. Or will you wait until you are chairing? Yes, thanks, Jonathan. Lindsay Collins' use of recipes as art, but also as intervention.
Yeah.
Oh, Yvette says Donna's preempting my keynote, so
and we are also food, of course.
We are also food, of course, and this is what Jackie's presentation is going to raise. If Jackie is here, she's going to say we're preempting her performance keynote. Yeah. I think let's just move away from content, which we're obviously starting to grapple with now, but which we'll be grappling with over the next 3 days. I just want to say something briefly about taking this forward. This is usually left until the end, but I think it would be good for us to think about it from the outset. We definitely have in mind bringing papers together in different forms, and I'm hoping that people will also just connect among themselves to think about how they can take various projects together, especially because you'll have opportunities to meet in small groups. One publication that I do want to flag, it was advertised on the website, is the publication Matatu. It's a peer-reviewed journal of African society and culture. I've forgotten the subtitle, but the focus is very much, cultural trends throughout the continent. And it will be putting together a special issue on food in Southern Africa. One of the editors will be presenting, and they've kindly agreed to extend the call for abstracts. So please do go to the website and check out that call. I'm sure many people will be interested. Anything else? Because if not, there's some other comments. Natasha, I would like to raise the question of access to food from a low-income housing perspective. Yeah. I think that takes us very much into the sort of meat of a panel discussion, Natasha. I don't know, Lebo or Vasu, if you want to respond to that now.
Yeah, I think that would be preemptive, but I mean, it's very important. I think what Natasha is raising are issues that we need to constantly keep in check, but we may run away with other ideas. But these are critical in the broader questions around social justice, the questions around inequalities, and we're looking at it broadly in its conceptual and empirical ways, and what meanings and relevance that has at a material level. Of people's lives in terms of access to food, in the context of other social challenges or wicked problems, if we could put it that way. Yeah, relevant, highly relevant. I
think highly relevant, but it also gets us to think about the kinds of solutions that have been offered that are often quite conservative, quite cynical. Welfareist approaches, quick fix solutions.
Yeah.
So hopefully we're also going to have a lot of discussion around, the alternatives, that there are no straightforward solutions to hunger and poverties. There are structural reasons that one needs to disentangle and engage with constantly.
Yeah.
Any other comments from the chat? Otherwise, I think we will hand over to Lynn to lead us into our first breakaway session, and thereafter start with our first panel. I just want to also say to people, if you are still anxious about this platform, I was too. In fact, I think I spoke for 5 minutes without being heard. And it's actually, it's a lovely platform. Sorry?
You muted yourself.
I muted myself, yeah. Once you get to know it, it's very user-friendly and it's great fun. It's really, I mean, we can create a fantasy world, which I think at this stage we all need, about sitting on poofs and doing all sorts of wonderful things. But it's also really very practical because you can engage with people in ways that you can't on many other platforms. Okay, so let me now hand over to Lynn to lead us into our first breakaway.